It's great to have you here at Exponential Talks, which we also call X Talks. X stands for exponential. The world is growing exponentially, so we want to grow exponentially, and we are sharing great stories of how we can be exponential as we go forward into the future. Today we have Raya with us, and Raya, can we share an early stage, can we share about your life at an early stage? How did you grow up? Where did you grow up? What sort of schools did you go to?
Sure. So I'm Iranian. Originally, I was born in the outskirts of a city called Karaj, which really is in the middle of nowhere in Iran. And my parents moved to Dubai in the late 90s, back when Dubai was just starting to boom. And really, we kind of started from the ground up, like many immigrants here or expats here. We came in with the hope of economic opportunity. So delayed gratification was one of those things I had to learn from a very young age. And one of the things that I've always loved doing is reading. I just remember from an early young age being very curious, having a lot of questions about the world, having a lot of existential questions. And I was very lucky to have parents that kind of nurtured that and bought me a lot of books. And in terms of schooling, for the longest time, I had a very traditional schooling. You know, I like many young minds, had this untapped potential and had to learn for exams in the traditional school curriculum. And that was until I was at the Winchester School, Jabal Ali, where, despite there being a traditional curriculum and the formal kind of industrial era model, there was a lot of innovative opportunities that were presented to me. We were working on a science festival, TEDx events. I was lucky to have a gifted and talented program. And all of that meant that I was able to start working on entrepreneurial projects from a very young age, expressing myself, writing, going on radio shows, speaking at conferences. And that just completely enriched my educational experience and shaped who I am from a very young age.
Do you remember a moment of inspiration, some kind of epiphany, or a moment where you just switched and said, enough of this nonsense from the past, I want to build the future?
There were lots of those moments. I think the biggest one for me was in university. For a lot of young people, your university experience gets really hyped up.
Yeah.
It's what you work your whole life towards. You're doing all these exams, you're like, I'm going to go to this school and that school and take this degree, and my whole life is going to change. And so that was me. I went to Boston University. I studied neuroscience, and very soon I learned that the system was broken. As someone who loved learning, I found that the process at university was quite meaningless. Here you have thousands and thousands of students paying tens of thousands of dollars, memorizing content for meaningless exams, working late hours in the library just for some exam at the end of semester, and then they forget all that information and they repeat the same process all over again.
Yeah.
And it all just seemed so meaningless and such an inefficient way to do things. And I remember when I actually worked in a research lab, in a neuroscience lab, we were doing neurobiology research, and I had to learn how to do science and learn how to actually be a neuroscientist and realize how useless a lot of my lectures were. And that's not really to put the university down. I think this is a very traditional university experience for a lot of people. And that kept building up, and you can add on that a layer of, seeing a lot of mental health issues arise amongst young minds. Mental health in students, the mental health at the moment is declining rapidly among students. Newspapers like The Guardian have a whole section on just student mental health. And while a part of this conversation is about having more counselors, reacting better to it, raising awareness, another question we need to be asking ourselves is, why are so many students so sad and unhappy to begin with? And so I was seeing a lot of that university. I was seeing a lot of peers around me not being able to find purpose and happiness and true meaning and connection in their lives. So all of that was starting to build up. And it just comes a time where you realize that something needs to be done about it. I was actually at a conference in Princeton when Luke Nosek, who's one of the founders of PayPal, he had this talk, and one of the things he said was, don't try to come up with entrepreneurship ideas, but instead find something that really pisses you off and then fix it and then monetize the solution to that. And even though you hear that in different shapes and forms, people say, solve the world's problems. I needed to hear that at that point in my life. And from there, I remember with Aweacademy, the idea started coming to me, and I quickly reached out to my now co-founder, Rohan Roberts, who's an award-winning educator, and we've collaborated together for so many years, and we thought, let's do something about this.
you've taken a wonderful degree, neuroscience. Not many people go into neuroscience. Can you explain what it is and how that's impacted you in terms of your growth and development?
Yeah, so I've always been a lover of science. I've always loved science because it's the most powerful tool in understanding reality, the world, and ourselves. And I was particularly drawn to neuroscience because of the mysteries behind it. So neuroscience, as we know, is a study of the brain.
Yeah.
And we know more about our brains, so we know more about the universe than we know about how our mind works.
Sure.
There's all these big mysteries, even consciousness, for instance, which is the basic core of our being. It's an absolute mystery. We don't know how, why certain patterns of neurons in your mind make you feel like a person and make you feel like you. And there's this incredible neuroscientist who popularized the field. His name is V.S. Ramachandran. And he says the brain is a 3-pound mass of jelly that you can hold at the palm of your hands. And it can contemplate the vastness of interstellar space. It can contemplate the meaning of the universe. And it can contemplate itself contemplating on the universe. But we don't know how it does that.
I understand what you're saying, but when you talk about consciousness, this is not a small issue, it's a huge issue. So I mean, you're starting with something as large as this. What about something very, very simple in terms of utilizing the brain more effectively for learning, utilizing our brain in terms of other emotions? As a neuroscientist, can you see, the synaptics going off in your head and see that gap between, and how can anticipate what people do, because there's a lot of development on the brain right now. Yeah.
There is. You bring up a really interesting and important point with neuroscience and education. For the longest time, why we taught the way we taught was kind of based on assumptions, unvalidated assumptions. It was more of an art than a science. But now we have an emerging field called neuroeducation, or some people refer to it as mind-brain education, which is the intersection of neuroscience and education. And essentially, it involves understanding how the brain works and using that to inform how we teach. It involves taking an evidence-based, scientific-based approach to teaching strategies and modeling it around what we know about the brain. So, a lot of the work that we do right now in education is informed by the latest findings in neuroscience and neuroeducation.
Last year, I interviewed Professor Michio Kaku, who is a great futurist and a physicist. And he really opened my mind about the mind, in the sense that we can actually track our dreams. We know when we're lying or not. So that's the end of politicians. Game over as far as they're concerned. So we can detect lies. We can capture memories. With all of this new development going on, is this fundamentally going to change the way we learn? And you, as an educator, would it start changing the way we educate?
Absolutely, it already has. As I said, all these findings, but let's be exponential and go even further.
Sure.
So we're starting to see this emerging exponential technologies around neurotechnologies. So just last year, Neuralink, one of Elon Musk's exponential companies, announced that they're going to start having brain implants built into the brains very soon. These brain-machine interfaces, at a very basic level, would be used for medical purposes, to be able to connect our minds to prosthetics, to be able to kind of react to certain disorders like Parkinson's. However, in the longer term, there's this exploration of this idea of having brain-machine interfaces with artificial intelligence implanted into our brains in order to upgrade how we think and our processing power, essentially.
Sure.
Now we have to ask ourselves, in a world like that, what does teaching even mean, or learning even mean? Does it involve just downloading things and ideas into our implants?
Yeah.
And we also have to kind of take it, educating people about that technology itself is also important.
So if all the knowledge is up there in the cloud, and you have a brain interface, so you have perfect knowledge connected to your brain, connected to yourself, so end of education?
Maybe. I mean, so end of education as we know it, but Ray Kurzweil, known as the best predictor of future technologies in the world by Bill Gates, he's a former director of engineering at Google, predicts that by the year 2045, we will be connected into the neocortex, as is part of cloud. And I think another exciting question I like to think about is, if we do connect our minds to this cloud and this intelligence, do we stop being ourselves? Do we stop being an I and instead become this we, this collective consciousness that's all connected into the cloud?
Right.
And I think that's a really fascinating existential question to ponder on.
I'd like to tap into, you talk about wisdom, but may I talk about ethics?
Yeah.
Because if you're talking about a brain chip going in there, and are we again creating a two-tier society where people who have have a bit of money will get the chip and everybody won't have it? So this will become a super race, and this will become the rest of the people. And what are the ethics of actually doing that? Where are you on that?
Yeah, look, we have to have these conversations and explore the ethical implications and try to optimize for the benefits and reduce the harms. So inequality is one of the big issues, ethical issues we need to explore. Another one is free will. If our minds can be hacked and controlled, what does that mean? Privacy issues will be taken to a whole new level with the risk of it hacking and so forth. But I do think that thinking about the exponential future of humanity, speciation is a very real possibility. Many futurists like Juan Enriquez point out that because we have such a breadth of variation amongst cultures, amongst values, ethics, already amongst the human race, what's going to happen is that people by nature will make very different decisions with regards to these technologies. So you may have certain cultures or a certain class of humans that decide that, we're going to merge with machines, and others decide to be more conservative. Maybe some will choose to be a different kind of cyborg. Maybe others will go with biotechnology and modify their genome. So I think that when thinking of the next several hundred years, speciation of us kind of branching out into different species of humans moving forward is a real possibility.
So in terms of your journey, you've moved through school, university, you're still a very young person. When you're grappling with these kinds of issues of the brain and so on, are you optimistic?
Absolutely. So, my co-founder Rowan and I launched an initiative a couple of years ago called Intelligent Optimism. And essentially, intelligent optimism is all about being optimistic about the future, but in an evidence-based way. So, it's all about looking at the data. It's not even an opinion at this point. The fact of the matter is that we're living longer, healthier, wealthier lives than any other point in human history.
Sure.
We've seen radical improvements in quality of life, infant mortality, maternal mortality has dropped by 100%, life expectancy has doubled, technology has increased our access to information, goods, and services. And I see us using these exponential technologies to solve global challenges. So I'm very optimistic about the future. But that's not to say that the world is perfect. I mean, of course, we have lots of challenges. We're always going to have challenges, and it's just about solving those challenges on an ongoing basis.
May I take you to the year 2030 and work back from there? Because that is how people like Elon Musk think. They take you into the future and they turn around and look back. How do you see the world of learning and education developing over the next 10 years?
Yeah.
And more importantly, where do you see the chasm? Where do you sort of fall into a gap? Because things haven't quite evolved yet, but hopefully they will. And I'm a great believer in human ingenuity, and I'm sure we will. So what's your task, your objective there versus where you are today? Just like Elon Musk does it for, say, something like Hyperloop.
Yeah.
He knows it's going to work at some point in time,
Yeah.
but we don't know how yet. What are your thoughts in terms of brain learning education in the year 2030, looking back from there, and for people watching this and saying, I have young people in my family, I have kids in my family, how are they going to evolve?
Well, the sad thing with the education system has been so resistant to radical innovation. And this isn't just my opinion. There's been a report called Measuring Innovation in Education that came out last year. And they actually found that, despite all the knowledge that we have now about 21st century skills and increased awareness about these important skills and competencies, it hasn't translated into any improvements in the curriculum. While they saw some improvements in active learning, they actually found that rote memorization increased among students. So, it's just mind-blowing that despite the future of work moving in the directions that it is, despite us going through this exponential change, the education system has stayed, largely focused on this model, the industrial era model. And a lot of schools think they're innovating, but then you ask them questions and you find out they're still using traditional exams to test learning. They're still focused on subjects. There's still a lot of rote memorization. There's still students are still organized by age rather than competency.
Sure.
There's no personalization, and you realize they're not really innovating. So what I really hope to see happen by the year 2030 is that a whole new class of schools, universities that are completely alternative to system are emerging, and they're starting to disrupt the traditional system. I personally don't see the traditional players evolving themselves. I would love to be proven wrong on this. But what I think will happen is these alternative, smaller, more agile entities are going to come up, and by 2030 they'll have so much amazing proof of concept to show what learning should be, and that's going to kind of be the turning point where people stop and pause and realize that they've been doing it wrong all this
So
time.
the existing systems will probably just implode because all the adjacent projects and initiatives will start eating into the center. One of my theses is that innovation is very unlikely to come from inside within a system, because the immune systems are really, really strong, and within the education space even more so. So it'll come from the adjacencies, and you have an amazing adjacency, your project, and I'd like to talk to you about that project. Just 1 second. Kat, where is she? Oh yeah. Could you just put on, 5 minutes more. Yeah, that's good. Because what we're doing is we're doing the general conversation, and I want her to talk about Aweacademy, but with some slides. So we're going to click, and we need a clicker. How old is the
2
child?
years old.
2 years old. Okay, so 2 years old, your child is a genius, right? And
Actually,
and you're going to spend the rest of your life making them dumb by sending them to school, right? So
Yeah, okay.
here's a teacher. Here's a teacher who, and she runs a school. What kind of what kind of aspirations do you have for your child in terms of their development, in terms of learning and development?
Well, to be able to be happy in his life.
Happy, brilliant. Now, is that what a parent normally asks? I want my child to be happy, rather than I want my child to go to Harvard Business School.
To be honest, we get both. There's lots of different kinds of parents out there, and some of them just say they want to see their children enjoy learning, and we hear that especially from parents, the kind of parents that would put their students in their children in our program. And then yet there are parents who would prefer that their kids get A stars and go to the
I believe
university.
this discussion can be as long as you want, because I really also think that the way not only schools but university are now teaching should change dramatically, and the old way of teaching, now in the area of information and etc., it should be different. And
So you as a parent, would you like to be trained again to be a future parent? Think about that.
That's a good question.
That's why it's supposed to be a question. Are you ready to be a future parent? Are you a good current parent?
I don't know. I try my best, but I don't know.
She will help to train you to become a super parent, a super future
awesome.
parent. Good to see you, buddy. Thanks very much. Thanks for
Nice
being so
meeting you.
supporting. Appreciate it. I want to make it random, because otherwise everything is just, I don't want it to be sanitized. You can break it. Okay, cool. So he's not happy with this particular because the production's gone upside down, and he's got different challenges.
It's like I'm editing this.
Yeah, exactly, of sound quality and all sorts of other things. We are here at Exponential Talks, and we're talking to Raya Bidshahri, who is an awesome young entrepreneur and an educator and a developer of wisdom and ethics and thought. And we have her here today. And as a final question, Raya, what I'd like to really, from my heart, ask you, you're going to live beyond 100 years. I hope you live way, way beyond that, because the world is going there. Let's assume today was your 100th birthday.
Oh, wow.
And we are celebrating your 100th birthday. What are we celebrating? What have you achieved? What have you done? How many Nobel Peace Prizes have you won? I mean, seriously, crazy, wacky, where are you?
Hopefully on Mars.
Great answer. Great answer.
To be honest, it may sound paradoxical coming from what some people might consider an overachiever. I, at that point, just hope that I've lived a fulfilling life with lots of present moments, with healthy loved ones who are hopefully alive with me, and that the world is a better place than it is today.
Great, sounds
Yeah.
very good. It's a real pleasure. Thank you very much
you.
indeed.
Thank
And
you.
that was Raya talking about completely paradoxical end to her life as she grows older, going from science back to humanity. And that is the essence of what we are at Exponential Talks, which is we talk about technology. Ultimately, we talk about humanity. Thank you. Thank you very much.